Kristiansburg greeted me with the usual hustle and bustle as I guided my silver Lexus through the downtown streets. Monday is my favorite day. Many people hate it, but I've always appreciated its possibilities. With the whole week ahead of me, it's like a blank canvas waiting for the first stroke. My main atelier was located in the state-of-the-art Imperial Business Center on Maple Avenue. I parked in the name spot and, glancing in the rearview mirror, fixed my hair. Even at 67, I didn't allow myself to look unkempt. Elegant haircut with silver strands, flawless makeup, pearl earrings and brooch, and a perfectly fitting ivory suit. Hampton Designs, the sign above the entrance read. 4 ateliers in Kristiansburg and 2 in neighboring towns. I walked inside, and the tinkling of the doorbell made the receptionist straighten up. "Good morning, Mrs. Hampton." Olivia, a young woman of 23, always greeted me with deference. "Good morning, Olivia. What do we have today?" "Mrs. Caulfield is coming for her fitting at 11, and at 2 o'clock she has a meeting with representatives of an Italian textile factory." "Oh, that's great. Coffee, please." I went into my office, which overlooked the cityscape of Kristiansburg. It was a spacious room with panoramic windows, stylish, minimalist furniture, and perfect lighting for working with fabrics. On the wall were pictures of models wearing outfits of my design, a few awards from the local Chamber of Commerce, and a diploma from Parsons School of Design that I'd received when I was younger. Olivia brought coffee, black, no sugar, and a stack of bills to sign. I was going through the paperwork when the phone rang. My daughter's name popped up on the screen, Perry. "Good morning, darling." "Mom, are you in the office yet? Restless as ever," she said, her voice with the firmness she'd inherited from me. "Of course I am. What are you doing up so early?" "Finishing up a presentation for a client." "Listen, would you mind if Ethan stopped by after the pool today? He could have lunch in the cafeteria of your business center and then go to the programming course. That way he doesn't have to drive home." "Sure, no problem." I mentally rearranged my schedule. "I'll even send Ronald to pick him up after the pool." "Mom, there's no need. He can take the bus." "I insist. Ronald has to take the paperwork to the main office anyway. It's on the way." "Whatever you say, he'll be at the Park Street pool by 5:30. "That's great. I'll tell Ronald. I'll send him to the course with a driver too." After the call, I thought about how different my relationship with my children was. Perry had always been closer, valuing family ties not out of sentimentality, but for practical reasons. She adopted my business approach to life, became a successful financial analyst, and raised my son with the same sensible rigor that I raised her. Things were different with Quinn. I still remember the day Walter announced he was leaving. 15 years ago, Tuesday night. Quinn was 22 and Perry was 19. He'd said this at dinner without lifting his eyes from his plate. "Elaine, we need to talk." I met someone. The someone was Rebecca, his assistant, 20 years younger. The story was banal to the point of yawning. I remember the thing that struck me the most at the time was not the betrayal but my own serenity. I took off the ring, put it next to his plate and said, "Pack your things in the morning." The children took the divorce differently. Perry was angry at her father and Quinn. Strangely, it was like he blamed me. As if my unwillingness to throw tantrums and fight for the marriage was a sign of coldness rather than dignity. 3 years after the divorce, Quinn married Cassidy, a pretty blonde with ambition beyond her abilities. She had been working as an insurance agent when they met, but quickly left her job after they married. At first, our relationship was pretty decent. I helped them with the down payment on their house, paid for a lavish wedding. When the twins, Olivia and Aiden, were born, I hired them a full-time nanny. My generosity was motivated less by affection for Cassidy than by my love for my son and grandchildren. But over the years, something changed. They began to take my help for granted, while increasingly forgetting to invite me to family events. There was a knock at my office. Lorraine, the head dressmaker, came in with sketches of the new collection. "Mrs. Hampton, I've finalized the designs you asked for." We spent the next 2 hours discussing cut details, fabric selection. Work has always been my salvation. Even on the hardest days after Walter left, I would dive headfirst into designing new collections. It allowed me not to think about personal problems and, importantly, it brought me a good income. Toward evening, I contacted Ronald, my driver, and instructed him to pick Ethan up from the pool. Little things like that always made me happy. the opportunity to take care of my grandson, albeit through an intermediary. Plus, I plan to set aside some time to meet him in the business center cafeteria before his classes. Around 6 p.m., I walked down to the cafeteria and saw Ethan. He was sitting at a table by the window, headphones in his ears, looking at something on his tablet. Tall for his age, with dark hair and a determined look, he looked so much like Perry. "Hi, Grandma." He took off his headphones and smiled when he noticed me. "Hello, darling. How was practice?" "Great! Coach says I have a chance to make the state team next year." We had lunch, discussing his swimming progress and his new programming classes. Unlike the Quinn twins, who had barely said hello to me lately, Ethan was always open and friendly. After lunch, I walked him to his car and instructed Ronald to drive my grandson to the course. Back at the office, I finished the last few things before going home. In the evening, my granddaughter Olivia, Quinn's daughter, called. In her 8 years, she had amazing powers of observation and sensitivity. "Grandma?" Her voice sounded excited. "Hello, darling. What's wrong?" "Nothing. It's just, did you know that Mom and Dad's wedding anniversary is this Saturday? I've been thinking. 10 years. That's a really big deal." "Of course I know. I even have a present ready." I lied. "I didn't get an invitation." "You didn't?" I could hear the surprise in her voice. "I just thought, Mom said it was for close friends only, and—" "Don't worry, honey. I'll definitely be there." After the conversation, I sat in my office looking at the cityscape outside the window. So, for close friends, and I'm obviously not one of them. Not the first time, of course. There were grandchildren's birthdays to which I was invited at the last minute or forgot to be invited at all. School plays that I didn't find out about until after the fact. Family trips where there was no room for Grandma. That evening, I called Perry to find out more about my brother's anniversary. "Yeah, they're having a party at the Azure," she said, frowning. "You didn't get an invitation?" "N. But Olivia let it slip." "Mom, maybe we shouldn't—" "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm his mother, and I'm going." I spent the next few days reflecting on the situation. Of course it hurt. But what annoyed me the most was that 2 months before, Quinn had asked me for money to organize a special night for Cassidy. $30,000. I transferred the money without question, and now— Saturday was sunny and warm. I chose a dark blue Chanel dress with pearl trim. I put my hair up in an elegant style and wore my favorite diamond earrings and the pearl necklace Walter had given me in the happy days of our marriage. I looked in the mirror and smiled at my reflection. The years had favored me, and I knew it. I rarely thought about my age, but tonight, as I prepared for this evening, I caught myself thinking that I looked good for my years. Despite the wrinkles around my eyes and mouth, my skin was still firm, my figure slender. I had always believed that beauty requires work, not regrets about past youth. I chose my gift with great care. For Quinn, a Swiss watch with his initials engraved on the back. For Cassidy, a Tiffany diamond bracelet. Together they cost almost $10,000, but I never skimped on gifts for the kids, even for the ones who didn't appreciate me. On the way to the restaurant, I checked my bank account through an app on my phone. The $30,000 payment to Azure for tonight's event had been made 2 days ago. I grinned, remembering Quinn calling me 2 months ago asking me to help organize a special night for Cassidy. Of course, I had agreed. I always agreed when it came to my kids. "Mom, I want to throw Cassidy a real party. Something really memorable," he'd said at the time. I wrote a check for the advance and promised to pay the balance before the event itself. And so, the money was transferred, the party was organized, but I never received an invitation. My car glided smoothly through the streets of Christiansburg, approaching the waterfront. Azure Coast was located on the shore of the lake in the most prestigious part of the city. I often went there with business partners, and the staff knew me well. Parking the Lexus in the restaurant's parking lot, I took the gift box and headed for the entrance. I put a calm, confident smile on my face, the same smile that helped me to sign favorable contracts and keep control of any situation. The maitre d' met me at the door with a bow. "Good evening, Mrs. Hampton. It's good to see you again." "Hello, Richard. I'm here to celebrate my son's wedding anniversary." "Of course you are. Follow me." He led me through the main dining room to the terrace where the banquet was set up. I noted that the decor was impeccable. White flowers, candles, fine china, silver crystal. A live quartet played classical music. The guests, about 50 people, chatted, laughed, sipped champagne. 30,000 well spent, I thought, appreciating the luxury of the party. An open bar, a gourmet menu, a professional photographer capturing every moment. Just like Cassidy likes it, flashy, expensive, showy. I noticed Quinn right away. My son stood at the bar surrounded by several men. At 37, he looked a lot like his father, tall, dark-haired, with the same determined chin and direct gaze. Dressed in a dark gray suit, he looked successful and confident, which in fact he was, a successful realtor specializing in high-end real estate. I was proud of him despite our troubled relationship. Cassidy spotted me first. She was standing in a group of women, talking animatedly. Her face froze for a moment, her smile gone. She apologized to her friends and headed toward me, clearly intending to intercept me before I approached my son. My daughter-in-law had always been noted for her spectacular looks. Even after 10 years of marriage and the birth of twins, she'd remained slim and attractive. Today she was wearing a red dress with a deep neckline, her hair styled in an elaborate style, her makeup perfect. But something in her eyes always made me wary. A cold calculation hidden behind a dazzling smile. "Elaine?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "What are you doing here?" I smiled and handed her the gift box. "I came to wish you a happy anniversary, dear." Cassidy didn't take the gift, crossing her arms over her chest. "I'm sorry, but you weren't invited." I kept my composure, though something inside me clenched. "I'm Quinn's mother." "Do I need an invitation?" "Yes, you do. It's our special day, and we wanted to spend it with only our closest friends." I noticed a few guests nearby listening to our conversation. Public humiliation is the first act of her little play. "I see," I said, still holding the gift. "Then just give this to Quinn. I'm sure you'll love it." Cassidy glanced over her shoulder, made sure Quinn was still busy talking, and turned to me. Her face changed suddenly, the mask of politeness falling away. "Listen, Elaine, we don't want you here, okay? You're always controlling everything, criticizing everything. This is our life, and we want to spend it without your constant scrutiny." I felt a few of the guests turn in our direction. Now we were the center of attention. "Cassidy, I just came by to congratulate." "Get out," she hissed, pointing her finger toward the exit. "Just get out of here." I froze, holding the gift box in my hands, staring into her anger-stricken face. In all the years I'd known Cassidy, she'd never allowed herself to be so blatantly rude. Usually her disdain was in the form of forgotten invitations, short visits, and fake smiles. But today, the masks were dropped. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that Quinn had finally seen us. He apologized to his companions and headed in our direction. I hoped in my chest that my son would stand up for me, put my wife in her place. But something in his gait, in the expression on his face, told me that he was not coming to help his mother. Rather, he was rushing to support his wife. "Mom?" His voice was surprised but not pleased. "We weren't expecting you today." "Quinn," I smiled at my son, "I came to congratulate you on your anniversary." "Thank you, but," he faltered, glancing at Cassidy. "We were planning a small party, just for our closest friends." "I noticed," I said, glancing around at the 50 guests. "It's very private." "Elaine," Cassidy's voice grew harsher. "I told you you weren't welcome here. Please leave." Quinn put a hand on his wife's shoulder as if to reassure her. "Cass, you don't have to." But I could see he wasn't trying to protect me. All he cared about was how the scene looked in the eyes of the guests. A public scandal at a flawless party was all he cared about. "It's all right," I said, keeping my dignity. "I won't get in your way." I placed the gift on the nearest table and looked into my son's eyes. "Congratulations on your anniversary." Turning around, I headed for the exit, trying not to notice the curious stares of the guests. Every step was hard. Not because of the physical pain, but because of the realization of betrayal. The son I'd sacrificed so much for couldn't find the strength to stand by my side. Richard looked at me in surprise as I left. "Leaving already, Mrs. Hampton?" "Yes, Richard. Turns out I'm not on the guest list." "But, you paid for the whole evening," he mumbled. "Yeah, it's funny, isn't it?" I smiled wryly. Have a good evening, Richard. When I got into the car, I took my time starting the engine. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear or nerves, not from anger. A quiet, icy anger that had been building up inside me for years. Every time I'd forgotten to be invited to my grandchildren's birthday party. Every time Cassidy smiled condescendingly as she accepted my gifts and help. Every time Quinn only called if he needed something. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. $30,000 for a party I wasn't even invited to. Absurd. My finger hovered over the cancel payment button. One click and the party would be ruined. I pictured Cassidy's face when she was informed that the bank card had been declined, that the bill hadn't been paid. I pictured Quinn's confusion and shame. The temptation was great, but I hesitated, not out of pity for them, out of respect for myself. Do the right thing so you won't be ashamed was a rule I'd followed all my life. I didn't want to stoop to petty revenge. But then I remembered Cassidy's eyes as she pointed me toward the exit. I remembered my son's silence, his inability to protect his own mother. And something inside me clicked. I pressed the button. Payment canceled, the screen said. $30,000 was back in my account. I started the car and drove out of the restaurant parking lot. For the first time in years, I felt liberation, as if I'd shed the heavy weight I'd been dragging around out of a sense of obligation and attachment. In the rearview mirror, I could see the shining lights of the Côte d'Azur. Soon, a very different holiday would begin there. Returning home, I made a decision. No one else would treat me with disdain. Not my son, not his wife, not anyone else. I had allowed myself to be used for too long, forgiven ingratitude and rudeness too often. From this day forward, everything would change. I wasn't going to retaliate or hurt. I was just going to respect myself enough to not tolerate disrespect from others, even if those others were my own family. When I got home, the first thing I did was take off my high-heeled shoes and pour myself a glass of red wine. My house greeted me with its familiar silence. The three-story mansion overlooking the lake sometimes seemed too big for one woman, but I'd never considered moving. It was my home, my fortress, built to my taste and with my money. I walked into the study, turned on the desk lamp, and settled into the leather chair. Taking a sip of wine, I opened my laptop and logged into my online banking. The payment to the restaurant had already been canceled, but my work was just beginning. I had financially supported my son and his family countless times over the past few years. The down payment on their house, monthly installments for the twins' tuition at a prestigious private school, renovations to their country home, a new car for Cassidy last Christmas, an investment in Quinn's real estate business. I methodically went through every regular payment, every automatic debit. The twins' school, $10,000 a month. The mortgage on their house, $5,000. Country club membership, $3,000. Insurance on both their cars, another $1,200. I wasn't struggling financially. My business was thriving. My investments were generating a steady income. But it wasn't about the money. It was the ingratitude, the neglect, the way they took my help for granted while keeping me at a distance. I used to think I was helping them out of love. Now I realized it was a way to maintain some kind of connection with my son. It was like I was paying for the right to be a part of their lives. And today I was clearly shown that even those payments were not enough to earn an invitation to their party. I started by canceling my school fees. Then I stopped my monthly mortgage payments. Club memberships, insurance, credit cards. I methodically turned off automatic payments one by one. Each click of the mouse brought a strange sense of release. Finished with the payments, I opened my day planner and started taking notes. I had a lot of things to review. Quinn was co-owner of my two ateliers, purely nominally, since he'd never been involved in running the business. The twins had trust funds that I had set up for their 18th birthdays. Cassidy had power of attorney for my medical decisions in the event of incapacity. All of this required change, not out of revenge, out of common sense. I couldn't trust these people anymore. The phone rang around 11 p.m. Quinn. I stared at the screen, listening to the ringtone, but I was in no hurry to answer. What could I say to him? What could he say to me after tonight's humiliation? I rejected the call and muted the sound. Then I opened Messenger and texted Perry, "We need to talk. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock at my house?" She replied almost instantly, "Sure, Mom. Is something wrong?" I didn't go into details. "I'll tell you when I see you. Good night." As I was showering before bed, the phone rang again, and again, and again. Quinn was persistent. I imagined what was happening at Azure right now. The party was supposed to be over in an hour. By then, the restaurant manager would probably have discovered the payment hadn't gone through. Quinn's bank card, which he must have offered as a backup, had been declined. I knew there weren't enough funds on it to cover such an amount. 50 guests, a gourmet menu, an open bar, musicians, a photographer, all of that had to be paid for. I imagined Quinn's confusion, Cassidy's panic, the whispers of the guests, a wedding anniversary that had turned into a disaster. Part of me felt satisfaction, but it wasn't schadenfreude, more like a sense of justice restored. They had rejected me, and now faced the consequences of their choice. I lay in bed with a book, but I couldn't concentrate on reading. My thoughts went back to tonight, to the look on Cassidy's face as she pointed me toward the exit, to Quinn's acquiescence. At 1 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on the door. Insistent, loud. I took my time getting downstairs. Through the intercom, I saw Quinn standing on the doorstep. His face was contorted with rage, his tie loose, his hair disheveled. "Mom, open up right now! I know you're home!" He kept pounding on the door. I put him on the intercom. "Quinn, it's late. We'll talk tomorrow." "You know what happened?" he yelled. "The payment for the restaurant has been canceled. We're in a terrible position. The guests saw everything." "How unpleasant," I replied calmly. "About as unpleasant as being kicked out of a party I'd paid for." "It was Cassidy. She didn't mean to hurt you. Damn it, Mom, open the damn door." "No, Quinn, not tonight. I'm tired and sleepy, and you should go home to your wife. I'm sure you have a lot of things to talk about." "You can't do this. It's mean. It's petty." He kept knocking. "Mean and petty?" My voice remained steady. "What do you call what you did today? What do you call accepting my help for years, but keeping me at a distance? Go home, Quinn. We'll talk when you've calmed down." I turned off the intercom but remained standing by the monitor. Quinn continued banging and yelling for a few more minutes. Then he pounded his fist on the door in impotent rage and left. I went back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from exertion. I had been the perfect mother for decades, supportive, generous, always ready to help. And now, for the first time, I was saying no. Said that their behavior was unacceptable, that my love and support had limits. I slept surprisingly well. In the morning, over a cup of coffee on the terrace, I reflected on how my life would change. No more regular payments for Quinn and his family. No more sudden requests for money for emergencies. No more trying to buy their love and attention. I decided I would leave the trust funds for the grandchildren untouched. The children should not have to suffer for their parents' mistakes. But they won't have access to the money until they reach the age of 21, not 18, as originally planned. By then, hopefully, they will be mature enough to use the funds wisely. As for the business, I've decided to buy out Quinn's share of the atelier. It would be fair he would receive a substantial sum, and I would regain full control of my life's work. The phone hasn't stopped ringing all morning. Quinn, Cassidy, even a few of their friends I barely knew. I didn't answer it. I needed time to think things through, to let my decisions be dictated by reason and not emotion. Around noon, Perry arrived. Unannounced, ahead of schedule. I saw her car through the window and went out on the porch. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked as she walked up the steps. "Quinn called me 5 times. He's furious. He says you caused a disaster for them yesterday." "Hello, honey." I hugged my daughter. "Let's talk inside." In the living room, I told her about last night, about how Cassidy chased me away, about how Quinn didn't stand up for me, about how I canceled a payment for a party I wasn't invited to. "God, Mom," Perry shook her head. I don't know what to say. I knew they could be ungrateful, but this is out of line." "It's not just yesterday," I said. "It's been building up for years. I've reviewed all the payments I've made to them. It's hundreds of thousands, Perry, and it's not even about the money. It's that they've taken my help for granted and treated me like a pesky old lady who's only there for her checkbook. What are you going to do?" "I've already canceled all my regular payments. I'm going to buy out Quinn's share of the business. I'm going to change the terms of the twins' trust funds. I'm gonna start living for myself, Perry. I've been living for others for too long. My daughter was silent as she considered my words. Then she took my hand. You have every right to do that. But, are you ready for the consequences? Quinn isn't one to take defeat lightly. I know my son, I sighed. He'll be angry, threatened, maybe even try to sue me. But eventually, he'll have to accept a new reality. A reality in which his mother is not an ATM, but a human being who deserves respect. I'm on your side, Mom, Perry said. No matter what happens. Those words meant more to me than she could have imagined. I didn't want to come between my children, didn't want to make Perry choose sides. But it was important to know that at least one of my children understood my feelings. After Perry left, I called my attorney and set up an appointment for the next day. There was a lot of legal paperwork to change, and I wanted it done right. Then I opened my day planner and started making a to-do list. Not just legal changes, but personal plans as well. A trip to Europe that I had been putting off for years. A photography course I'd always been interested in. Perhaps even a new clothing line, bolder and more avant-garde than what I usually designed. For the first time in a long time, I was thinking only about myself, my desires and dreams, not about what my children or grandchildren need, not about how to support someone else's business or education, just about myself. And it was liberating. Cassidy called that evening. I hesitated, but I decided to answer. I was ready for a flood of accusations, for hysterics, even threats. But instead, I heard an almost ingratiating tone. Elaine, we need to talk about yesterday. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I kept my voice steady. I think it was pretty clear, Cassidy. You didn't want me at your party. I left. End of story. No, you misunderstood. I was stressed out, the guests, the organization. I didn't mean what I said. Quinn and I are so sorry. Why don't you come over for dinner in the next few days? We can talk it over in peace? I almost laughed. How predictable. The party turned out to be a disaster. Bank cards are blocked, and suddenly I'm welcome in their home again. I'm afraid I'm on a tight schedule for the next few weeks, I said. Besides, I think we all need time to think about our relationships. But Elaine, this is so awkward. The restaurant. Bills. Her voice trembled. Yes, I can imagine. It must be very embarrassing not being able to pay for your own party. Almost as embarrassing as being publicly humiliated at a party you paid for yourself. We'll make it up to you. There was desperation in her voice now. We just need a little time to raise the necessary amount. Don't worry about it, I said dryly. Consider it my last anniversary present. What do you mean? I'll call the restaurant tomorrow and pay the bill. But this is the last time, Cassidy. No more financial contributions, no more paying bills, no more payday loans. You and Quinn are adults with good incomes. It's time for you to learn to live within your means. But twin school, the mortgage. She started listing expenses that I used to cover. That's not my concern anymore, I interrupted her. You had 10 years to build a financial cushion, to save for your children's education, to pay the mortgage. Instead, you spent your money on designer clothes, exotic vacations, and parties for close friends. Now you'll have to learn to prioritize. There was a long pause. Then Cassidy said quietly, but with menace in her voice, Quinn is your son. The twins are your grandchildren. You can't just turn your back on us because of one incident. I'm not turning my back on you, Cassidy. I'm just not being your ATM anymore. There's a difference. And it's not because of one incident. It's the result of years of neglect and ingratitude. You're going to regret this. Her voice became hard. Maybe. But my only regret now is that I've allowed myself to be treated that way for too long. Good night, Cassidy. I ended the call and took a deep breath. The conversation had gone exactly as I'd expected. First the ingratiation, then the requests for money, and finally the threats. Predictable to the point of pain. Deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Quinn and Cassidy wouldn't take the loss of financial support lightly. There would be more calls, visits, maybe even attempts to manipulate through the grandchildren. But I was ready for it. For the first time in years, I felt truly strong and determined. I opened my day planner and added another item to my list. A weekend trip with Perry and Ethan. It was time to start putting time and energy into a relationship that was truly valued and supported by both parties. As for Quinn and his family, well, they would have to accept the new rules of the game. Or not accept. That was their choice. But my choice had been made, and I wasn't about to back down. It had been a week since the incident at the Azure. A week filled with calls, texts, and Quinn's attempts to meet with me. I kept my distance, not answering most of the calls and declining invitations to family dinner. I needed time to process what had happened and to solidify my decision. On Wednesday morning, I was sitting in my office at the atelier, reviewing sketches for a new collection when my assistant Olivia knocked on the door. "Mrs. Hampton, your son is here. He insists on seeing you." I looked up from my papers. "Is he alone?" "Yes, he is." "All right, show him in." I straightened in my chair and folded my hands on the desk. Not nervous, just getting ready. Quinn entered the office without knocking, his face a mixture of annoyance and anxiety. He was unshaven, wearing a wrinkled shirt, not at all like the always impeccably dressed realtor he was proud to be. "Mom," he stopped at my desk without sitting down. "This has to stop." "Good morning, Quinn." I nodded to the chair across from me. "Sit down, please." "I'm not going to sit. Do you realize what you're doing? You're ruining our lives." "Dramatizing, as always," I sighed. "Sit down. I'm not going to talk to you while you're standing over me like a parole officer." He hesitated, then reluctantly lowered himself into the chair, but his whole demeanor showed he was ready to jump up at any second. "The twins' school called," he began without preamble. "Their accounts are unpaid. They can expel the kids if payment isn't received by the end of the week." "I understand," I nodded. "What do you plan to do?" "What do I—" He stared at me. "Mom, you've always paid their tuition. From the beginning. It was your decision to send them to this particular school." "It was. It was my decision. Just like it was my decision to stop paying." "But why? Because of what happened on the anniversary? It's petty and cruel. You're punishing the kids for Cassidy's mistake." I looked at my son carefully. Did he really not understand, or was he just pretending? "It's not punishment, Quinn. It's reality. A reality where adults pay for their children's education themselves." "We can't afford this school, you know that." "Then move them to a school you can afford," I shrugged. "Or cut back on other expenses. The mortgage on your house, the country club membership, the annual vacations to the islands all cost money. Money that could be spent on your children's education." Quinn blushed. "You have no right to dictate how we live our lives." "That's exactly what I'm saying," I smiled. "I'm not dictating how you live. I just don't fund your lives anymore. There's a difference. This is all about Cassidy, isn't it? You've always disliked her." "No, Quinn. This is about you. Because of your choice to keep quiet when your wife pointed your mother out the door. Your choice to take my help for granted all these years. Because of your disrespect." "I respect you," he exclaimed. "Make no mistake about it. Respect is more than just polite words when you meet someone. It's recognizing another person's worth, their feelings, their boundaries. You're not respecting me, Quinn. You're using me." He stood up, looming over the table. "If you don't resume payments, we'll lose everything. The house, the kids' school, everything." "Don't be dramatic." I remained calm. "You have a good job. Cassidy has education and experience too. She can go back to her career. You're just used to living beyond your means, relying on my support." "I called my father," Quinn said suddenly. "He agrees with me. He thinks you're being irrational." The move should have hurt me, but I just laughed. "Oh, I'm sure Walter thinks so, especially since he's never paid a dime for your education or anything else since the divorce." "He's going to sue." Quinn's voice became menacing. "For your share of the business you built together. The business he walked away from 15 years ago without a dime of compensation because he preferred quick freedom to marrying his secretary." I shook my head. "Let him file. My lawyers would be happy to meet him in court." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my checkbook. Slowly, deliberately, I wrote out a check for $100,000 and held it out to Quinn. "What's this?" He stared at the amount. "Your money," I replied calmly. "No strings attached, no strings attached. Do what you want with it." "But, why?" His voice shook. distrust mixed with greed in his eyes. Consider it a last gift from your mother, I said, or a compensation for the cessation of regular payments. Choose whichever explanation you prefer. Quinn took the check, still looking stunned. Thank you, but it doesn't solve the problem with regular payments. No, it doesn't. There won't be any more regular payments, Quinn. $100,000 is all you're going to get from me. But the school, it's up to you, I interrupted him. It's your money, your kids, your decision. He looked at me carefully. Is this some kind of test? Life is full of tests, I shrugged. But I'm not going to give you any clues. After Quinn left, I called my financial advisor and alerted him to a large withdrawal from my account. Then I contacted my attorney to begin the process of buying out my son's stake in the business. I proceeded methodically, without emotion, like a business transaction, because that's what a business deal was, the final division of our financial affairs. The rest of the day passed in the usual routine, meetings with suppliers, discussing new models, dealing with current issues. In the evening, I got a call from Perry. Mom, Quinn called you today? He didn't call, he came by, I answered. I assume he's already given you his side of the story? Yes. He said you gave him a large sum of money but refused to resume regular payments. He's confused. It was a test, Perry, I admitted. A test to see if he cares more about his children's future or his immediate pleasures. And you think he's going to fail that test? We'll see, I said. But I wouldn't be surprised to find out a month from now that the twins are still in danger of expulsion and Quinn and Cassidy are vacationing in the Maldives. You've gotten cynical, Mom. Perry's voice sounded sad. Not cynical, but realistic. There's a difference. We talked some more, and before we said goodbye, Perry asked, Listen, Ethan and Brian and I were going to go to Crystal Lake this weekend. Do you want to come? I'd love to, I replied. It had been a long time since we'd been outdoors as a family. Brian would love that. He was just asking yesterday when we'd see you again. He says he needs advice on expanding his architecture firm. Brian, Perry's husband, has always been a real favorite of mine. A talented architect, he'd started his own firm 5 years ago and managed to make it one of the most promising in the city. At the same time, he was a caring father and husband, always making time for his family despite his busy schedule. Unlike Walter, who constantly sacrificed family time for work and then for a young mistress. I'd be happy to help with advice, I said. In fact, we should get together more often. I've been too caught up in work and… Quinn. You've always been there for me, Mom, Perry said softly. It's just that now, hopefully, you'll have more time and energy for the things that really bring you joy. After talking to my daughter, I felt a surge of energy. Perry was right. Too much energy was being spent on Quinn's endless problems, trying to earn his respect and gratitude. It was time to redistribute that energy. I spent the next morning in the main atelier, working on a new concept that had been brewing in my head for months. A clothing line for women my age. Elegant, modern, comfortable, but not old-fashioned or impersonal like most collections for mature ladies. I sketched out a few designs and discussed the idea with the head designer. He was delighted. The niche really wasn't filled enough, and the target audience had solid buying power. Let's start with a small capsule collection, I decided. Let's see how the market reacts. Working on the new collection completely absorbed me. It was not just a business project, but a kind of creative manifesto. A statement that life after 60 can be bright, stylish, and full of new beginnings. I worked with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in a long time. Each sketch reflected a part of me. My experience, my confidence, my new sense of freedom. It wasn't just a garment, it was a story. The story of a woman who had finally learned to appreciate herself. Friday night, I packed for my trip to the lake. Perry said to take something warm for the evening, comfortable shoes, and a swimsuit. I knew Brian liked to vacation in comfort, even outdoors. His Range Rover SUV was equipped with everything needed for the perfect camping trip. From a huge multi-room tent to a portable refrigerator and comfortable folding furniture. On Saturday morning, they picked me up at 9 sharp. Brian at the wheel, Perry beside him, Ethan in the back seat surrounded by backpacks and boxes of supplies. Grandma! Ethan waved happily at me. I had my new fishing rod, and I took a bottle of excellent Chateau Margaux, 2010 years old. Perry winked at me. You and I need a relaxing evening around the fire. I took almost everything else, Brian laughed. Believe me, Elaine, this time we broke the previous record for the most absolutely necessary camping stuff. The drive to Crystal Lake took about an hour. We talked about everything: Ethan's school, Perry's work, my plans for the new collection. No tension, no hidden agendas, no careful detours into painful topics. Just free, easy conversation. When we arrived at the site, Brian and Ethan were busy setting up camp while Perry and I were unpacking groceries. Impressive, I said, watching them set up the huge tent with 3 sleeping compartments and a central living room. Is this something new? Brian bought it before the trip. Perry shook her head. He said the old tent wasn't functional enough. You know, when it comes to comfort, he doesn't recognize compromise. Within an hour, we had a real camping house set up. A large tent with comfortable folding chairs with armrests, a table, several inflatable sofas, a barbecue grill, and even a small camp kitchen with a gas stove. What, Brian? Afraid of nature without a filter? I joked as I watched him adjust the LED lights inside the tent. Not nature, but mosquitoes, rain, and uncomfortable surfaces. He winked. Why suffer when you can enjoy it? Besides, nature is best contemplated from a comfortable chair with a glass of good wine. We spent the day swimming in the lake, walking around the neighborhood, and, of course, fishing. Ethan proudly demonstrated his skills, and Brian, who turned out to be an unexpectedly skillful fisherman, was already planning an evening barbecue of freshly caught trout. As the sun began to sink, we gathered around the fire. Brian masterfully grilled the fish, Perry made a salad, and I opened the wine. Ethan, who was devouring his dinner with an enviable appetite, talked about his plans for his school science project. I want to create a model of a closed-loop economy, he explained seriously. Do you know, Grandma, how companies can recycle waste into resources for new production? Impressive, I smiled. When I was your age, all I thought about was new dresses and boys in the next class. Just like your grandfather, Brian patted his son on the head. My father always said, business should be not only profitable, but also responsible. After dinner, Ethan went to the tent to play a handheld console. Only an hour, then bed, Perry warned him sternly. And we adults stayed around the fire with glasses of wine. So, Elaine? Brian slid a comfortable rocking chair over to the fire for me. Perry said you wrote Quinn a check for $100,000? Yeah, I shrugged. A sort of final gift and a test. What's he going to spend it on? Brian nodded. Smart and harsh. But fair, Perry added. Though I still hope Quinn makes the right choice. I don't, Brian said suddenly. I'm sorry, dear, but your brother always takes the easy way out. I'd be surprised if even 10,000 of that money went to the children's education. You're too hard on him, Perry objected, but without much conviction. No, he's realistic. I sipped my wine. And so am I. That's why I decided to dot all the I's and stop being an ATM for Quinn. Brian nodded. You know, I've always admired the way you ran your business, Elaine. Tough but fair, with clear boundaries. But with Quinn, those boundaries have always been blurred. Because he's my son, I sighed. A mother's love sometimes clouds the mind. But not right now. Perry took my hand. And I'm proud of you for that. We talked until almost midnight, discussing strategies for expanding Brian's business, sharing our experiences, debating risks and opportunities. Brian always valued my opinion and often sought my advice on business matters, never thinking it was a shame to learn from my mother-in-law. This was another of his strengths, the ability to listen and acknowledge other people's experience without seeing it as a threat to his own ego. When the conversation turned to my new collection, Brian suggested an interesting idea. What if we approach it not just as a clothing line, but as a way of life? Create a whole philosophy for women who want to be elegant and stylish at any age? What do you mean? I wondered. Well, besides the clothes themselves, you can develop accessories, perfumes, maybe even a line of furniture or interior items. Anything that creates a certain atmosphere and lifestyle. Brian, you're a genius. I looked at him with a new respect. This is exactly what is missing in the marketplace. Not just clothes for older women, but a whole concept of life after 60. Vibrant, stylish, fulfilling. Mom always had impeccable taste. Perry smiled. And she always had a way of creating a special atmosphere around her. I remember when my friends loved our house when they were teenagers. They said it was like a magazine, but you wanted to live in it. We had a long discussion about possible directions for the development of the idea, and I felt a creative fire inside that I hadn't felt in a long time. This was not just a business project, it was a new chapter in my life. The next day, as Ethan and I went for a walk along the lakeshore, he suddenly asked, "Grandma, is it true that Uncle Quinn had a fight with you over money?" I looked at my grandson with surprise. "How do you know?" "I heard Mom and Dad discussing it," he shrugged. "They thought I was asleep." I sighed. Of course, you can't hide things like that from a smart teenager. "It wasn't really about the money, Ethan. More like different outlooks on life and responsibility. Like in business?" He raised an eyebrow. "You said that in business, it's important not only to make money, but also to be responsible for your decisions." "Exactly," I smiled, surprised by his insight. "It's the same in life. You can't always rely on someone else to solve your problems. You have to be able to make your own decisions and take responsibility for them." "I understand," he nodded seriously. "Dad says the same thing, that you can't live on other people's money forever, even if the family gives you the money." I put my arm around my grandson's shoulders. "Your dad is a wise man, and you learn the right things from him." That evening, as we were packing before we left, Brian took me aside. "You know, Elaine, I've been meaning to tell you for a long time. You did the right thing with Quinn. Sometimes the hardest part is letting those closest to you face the consequences of your own decisions." "You sound like someone with experience," I said. "My father was an alcoholic," he said quietly. "My mother covered for him for 20 years, paying the bills, apologizing to people, until one day she said enough. It was the only time my father had a chance to change. He didn't take it, but at least my mother was free." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Brian, for your support and for being such a wonderful husband to Perry and father to Ethan." "It's easy," he smiled. "With a mother-in-law who didn't try to control my every move and didn't demand constant proof of loyalty." I laughed. "Flatterer! I'm just telling it like it is," he winked. "You know, we should make this weekend at the lake a tradition. Maybe next time we could go for a whole week. I've been wanting to show Ethan the mountains north of here for a long time." "I'd love to," I agreed. "I should learn to delegate more business responsibilities and make time for what really matters." On the way home, I thought about how different my children had grown up. Perry, who has shown independence and responsibility from a young age, and Quinn, who was always looking for the easy way out and expecting someone to solve his problems. I loved them both, but love shouldn't have blinded me to the point where I couldn't see reality. 2 weeks after Quinn's visit, I got a call from my banker. "Mrs. Hampton, I just wanted to clarify. Are you aware that your son withdrew almost the entire amount from the twins' trust fund?" I froze. The trust fund for Olivia and Aiden's education was set up by me after they were born. Quinn was designated as the trustee until the children came of age, but the money was supposed to be used solely for their education. "How much did he withdraw?" I asked, feeling a cold rage rising inside. 90% of the total amount. The balance is almost symbolic." "I see. Thanks for the information." I disconnected and sat still for a while, gathering my thoughts. So, not only had Quinn not used my 100 grand to pay for school, but he'd emptied his children's education fund. The test was completed, and the result was even worse than I had expected. That same evening, I saw pictures on social media of Cassidy in front of the pool of a luxury resort. "Spontaneous vacation. We deserve it," the caption read. Quinn could be seen in the background, sipping a cocktail. I felt no schadenfreude, only fatigue and a final realization. My son will never change. He would always take the easy way out, momentary pleasures and outward glitz instead of responsibility. It's been 3 months since I stopped funding Quinn and his family's life. 3 months of a new reality for all of us. I knew from Perry that the son and his wife were indeed in a difficult situation. They had to sell one of their cars, give up their country club membership, move the twins to a community school. I did recreate the trust funds for Olivia and Aiden, but now with strict conditions, the money could only be used for education. No one but me and an independent trustee could manage it, and the children would only have access once they turned 18. Quinn called me several times a week, now accusing me, now apologizing, now asking for help. I was polite but firm. My decision remained unchanged. Cassidy tried to work through the children, having them call me with stories of how much they missed their old school, how hard it was without a babysitter, how much they missed their grandmother. I listened to my grandchildren with sympathy, but did not give in to this obvious manipulation. However, there were many good things going on in my life. After our first trip to the lake with Perry and her family, I had an idea that completely captured my imagination. Watching Brian assemble their multi-purpose tent, which easily transformed from a compact roll-up to a spacious camping home with multiple compartments, I thought, why not apply the principle of transformation to clothing? Over the past 2 months, I have been secretly working on the first prototypes. In my workshop, I had a special private corner where even the most trusted employees were not allowed. I personally selected the fabrics, studied the fastening techniques, developed the transformation mechanisms. I wanted everything to be perfect before I showed it to anyone. And so, as we were planning another trip to the lake, I decided it was time to unveil my invention. What is it? Perry looked curiously at the bulky bag I'd loaded into their SUV before we left. Surprise! I smiled enigmatically. I'll show you on the spot. Brian, as always, had taken a responsible approach to organizing the vacation. His new SUV was loaded with everything needed for a perfect camping trip. A huge multi-room tent, air mattresses with an electric pump, folding furniture, a portable refrigerator, a gas grill of the latest model. This time I took the tent up a notch, he proudly explained as we drove down the highway. 3 sleeping compartments, a central living room, and a tent for the kitchen. And it all folds into one compact bag. You're obsessed with comfort, Perry laughed. Not comfort, but efficiency, he corrected. Maximum function with minimum space. It's a principle of modern design. I smiled as I listened to them. It was the principle behind my new designs. When we arrived at the lake, Brian and Ethan set up camp while Perry and I unpacked groceries. Within an hour, we had a real camping house set up. A large tent with comfortable folding armchairs, a table, several inflatable sofas, a barbecue grill, and even a small camp kitchen with a gas stove. After lunch, when everyone was by the lake, Ethan was fishing, Brian was reading a book on a lounge chair, and Perry was swimming. I decided it was time for my surprise. Gather round, I called to them. There was something I wanted to show them. They gathered outside our campground, intrigued. I pulled 3 packages out of my bag, each neatly wrapped and signed. These are for you. I held them out to Perry, Brian, and Ethan. Try them on, please. They unwrapped the bags. Inside were seemingly ordinary things. A jumpsuit for Perry, a double-layer t-shirt for Brian, a jacket for Ethan. Thanks, Mom. Perry looked at the overalls, made of light but durable fabric in a neutral beige color. It looks great, but why did you bring them here? Try them on, I repeated with a smile. And I'll show you. They changed into their new clothes, which, to their surprise, fit perfectly. Now, I walked over to Perry. Look closely. I showed her the hidden clasps and special seams on the jumpsuit. In one motion, the top unbuttoned, turning it into an elegant blouse. Another, and the bottom transformed from pants into a skirt. Oh my God! Perry looked at me in amazement. How is that possible? Special construction, I explained, helping her put the jumpsuit back together. One piece, but it looks like 3 different outfits. Then I walked over to Brian. Your turn. With a few simple movements, his double-layer t-shirt was transformed into a set of tank tops and shorts. I can't believe it. He looked at the resulting set from every angle. It's perfect for traveling. You can take 1 thing instead of 3. Ethan, without waiting for my instructions, had already examined his jacket and discovered that it could turn into a vest, a backpack, and even a small tent for 1 person. Grandma, you're a genius! He exclaimed, unfolding the jacket into a mini tent. This is cooler than any superhero costume. We spent the next hour experimenting with transformations. I explained how each part worked, showed hidden pockets, and talked about the special materials I used. The idea came to me after our last trip, I admitted. Watching Brian assemble the tent, I thought, why not apply the same principle to clothing? Maximum function with minimum stuff. When did you have time to design all this? Perry asked, still not believing her eyes. I've been working in my spare time for the last 2 months, I smiled. These are just prototypes, of course. There's still a lot of tweaking to be done. But the principle works, as you can see. It works. It's revolutionary. Brian was thrilled. Can you imagine the potential of this idea? It's a whole trend in fashion design. We spent the whole evening discussing how the concept could be developed. Brian, with his architectural mind, offered interesting design solutions. Perry was thinking about marketing strategy. Even Ethan got involved, suggesting ideas for a teen line. You know what would be really cool? He said, roasting marshmallows on the fire. A school uniform that converts into sportswear. No need to carry a separate set for PE. Great idea, I nodded, making a mental note. I'll write it down for future reference. When Ethan went to sleep in the tent, we adults stayed by the fire with glasses of wine. I'm serious, Elaine, Brian said, sitting down in a folding chair. There's a lot of potential in this idea. You should patent the technology and put it into production. Do you think so? I was still hesitant. It's a completely different direction than my usual collections, after all. That's why it's brilliant, Perry interjected. You'll be entering a whole new market. Think about it. Camping gear, travel clothes, school uniforms, Transformer suits. The possibilities are endless. We talked until almost dawn, discussing the prospects of the new direction. For the first time in a long time, I felt such a creative boost, such enthusiasm. It was not just a new business direction, it was a completely new stage of my life. We all spent the next 2 days at the lake in my prototypes, testing them in real-world conditions. Perry found that her jumpsuit was perfect for walking through the woods, and then easily transformed into an elegant outfit for an evening by the fire. Brian kept his transforming t-shirt on, constantly marveling at its practicality. And Ethan managed to sleep in his tent jacket, claiming it was the most comfortable camping bed he'd ever tried. Sunday night, as we drove back into town, I felt an extraordinary surge of energy. So many ideas, so many possibilities. You know, Mom, Perry said as we drove up to my house, I haven't seen you this happy in a long time. I thought about it. It was true that for the past few months, despite all the difficulties with Quinn, I had felt alive, like I'd been freed from a heavy weight and could finally breathe. You're right, I agreed. I guess I needed this crisis to finally start living my life. I just wish Quinn could understand that, Perry sighed. He still thinks you're punishing him by taking away his financial support. He doesn't see how you've actually given him a chance to grow up and take responsibility for his life. He may never realize that, I shrugged. And I'm okay with that. You can't force someone to change if they don't want to. The next week, Olivia, my granddaughter by Quinn, called me on her own, the first time without any prompting from her parents. Grandma, she said quietly, as if she was afraid of being overheard, I want to see you. Can I come to you? Of course, sweetheart, I replied, surprised at her initiative. Do your parents know about the call? No, she said quietly. They fight all day long. Dad says Mom spends too much. Mom yells that he can't provide for the family. I just want to be somewhere quiet. My heart ached at her words. Children shouldn't be held hostage to their parents' financial problems. I arranged to pick her up after school the next day. Olivia stayed with me all evening. We cooked dinner, watched a movie, talked about everything. She told me that she had made good friends at her new school, that the teachers were more attentive to the students than at the prestigious private school, that she liked the robotics class she had signed up for. You know, Grandma, she said before going to bed in the guest bedroom, I really like the new school. It's just that Mom keeps saying how awful it is and how we should go back to the old one. What does your brother think? I asked. Aiden? He doesn't care where he goes to school. He's only interested in soccer, and the new school has a good team. I drove Olivia home in the morning. Quinn met us on the doorstep with a wary look on his face. Mom, what's going on? Olivia wanted to spend time with me, I answered calmly. We watched a movie, had dinner, talked. It was no big deal. You should have warned us, he said with irritation. I thought Olivia had warned you. She said she was spending the night at a friend's house. I looked at my granddaughter, who stood with her eyes downcast. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth, Daddy, she mumbled. I just wanted to see Grandma. Quinn hesitated, clearly torn between wanting to reprimand his daughter and the fear of ruining things with me even more. Finally, he sighed. Okay, come on in. Mom made breakfast. I was about to leave when Quinn suddenly stopped me. Wait, Mom. Why don't you, come in for a cup of coffee? It was so sudden that I didn't immediately know what to say. Part of me wanted to say no, I wasn't ready for another confrontation with Cassidy. But the other part of me realized that this gesture could be the first step toward mending the relationship. Not a return to the same old financial dependency, but a new, healthy family bond. Just for a cup of coffee, I agreed. I had a meeting in an hour. Quinn's house looked different than it had before. Gone were some of the expensive furnishings, paintings, designer furniture. But in a strange way, it made the space cozier, more human. Cassidy met me in the kitchen with a strained smile. She looked tired, her makeup unable to hide the shadows under her eyes. Elaine, she nodded. Coffee? Yes, thank you. We sat at the kitchen table, me, Quinn, Cassidy, and Olivia. Aiden had already left for practice and talked about the weather, about school, about work. Not a word about money, about past hurts, about future expectations. Just small talk between people who happened to be at the same table. As I was leaving, Quinn walked me to my car. Thanks for stopping by, he said awkwardly. And thanks for taking care of Olivia. I know we're going through a rough patch right now. She's a good girl, I replied. Smart, sensitive. She's welcome to call me anytime. I'll tell her, he faltered. Mom, Cassidy and I had reevaluated a lot of things over the months. I got a second job. She's going back to her career. We're, learning to live within our means. That's good to hear. I nodded, trying not to sound surprised. It's the right thing to do. I'm not asking you to resume payments, he added hastily. I just wanted you to know that we're doing okay. I understand why you did what you did. I guess it really was the only way to make us grow up. I looked at my son carefully, trying to see if he was sincere or just another manipulation. But in his eyes, I could see the tiredness of a man who was really making an effort to change his life. I'm glad you realize that, I said finally. And I wish you luck. As I got into the car, I felt no triumph, no pity, no desire to immediately renew my financial support. Just the quiet assurance that I'd done the right thing. Quinn and Cassidy were finally starting to take responsibility for their lives. They probably still had a long road ahead of them, full of mistakes and disappointments. But it was their path, and they had to make it on their own. And I had my own road to travel, with new ideas, new projects, support from Perry, Brian, and Ethan, and direct, honest communication with my grandchildren from Quinn. A life in which I finally learned to value myself and my boundaries. A life in which I no longer allowed anyone, not even my own children, to disrespect me. And you know what? It was a beautiful life.